A reading from the letter of St. Paul to the Philippians. Brothers and sisters, I rejoice greatly in the Lord that now, at last, you revived your concern for me. You were, of course, concerned about me, but lacked an opportunity. Not that I say this because of need, for I have learned, in whatever situation I find myself, to be self-sufficient. I know indeed how to live in humble circumstances. I know also how to live with abundance. In every circumstance and in all things, I have learned the secret of being well-fed and of going hungry, of living in abundance and of being in need. I have the strength for everything through Him who empowers me. Still, it was kind of you to share in my distress. You Philippians indeed know that at the beginning of the gospel, when I left Macedonia, not a single church shared with me in an account of giving and receiving, except you alone. For even when I was at Thessalonica, you sent me something for my needs, not only once, but more than once. It is not that I am eager for the gift. Rather, I am eager for the profit that accrues to your account. I have received full payment, and I abound. I am very well supplied because of what I received from you through Epaphroditus, a fragrant aroma, an acceptable sacrifice pleasing to God. My God will fully supply whatever you need, in accord with His glorious riches in Christ Jesus. The word of the Lord.
The responsorial psalm. The response is, Blessed the man who fears the Lord. Blessed the man who fears the Lord, who greatly delights in His commands. His posterity shall be mighty upon the earth, the upright generation shall be blessed. Blessed the man who fears the Lord. Well for the man who is gracious and lends, who conducts his affairs with justice. He shall never be moved. The just one shall be in everlasting remembrance. Blessed the man who fears the Lord. His heart is steadfast, he shall not fear. Lavishly he gives to the poor. His generosity shall endure forever. His horn shall be exalted in glory. Blessed the man who fears the Lord.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Jesus said to His disciples, I tell you, make friends for yourselves with dishonest wealth, so that when it fails, you may be welcome into eternal dwellings. The person who is trustworthy in very small matters is also trustworthy in great ones, and the person who is dishonest in very small matters is also dishonest in great ones. If, therefore, you are not trustworthy with dishonest wealth, who will trust you with true wealth? If you are not trustworthy with what belongs to another, who will give you what is yours? No servant can serve two masters. He will either hate one and love the other, or be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. The Pharisees, who loved money, heard all these things and sneered at Him. And He said to them, You justify yourselves in the sight of others, but God knows your hearts. For what is of human esteem is an abomination in the sight of God. The Gospel of the Lord.
The first reading is from Philippians 4:10-19. In this passage, toward the end of Paul's letter to the Philippians, we hear how the Philippians had sent some money to help Paul while he's in prison. Remember, in the 1st century AD, when you're in prison, you have to pay for your own food, your clothes, and if you're under house arrest, even for your guard. And so Paul needed some sustenance. He couldn't work in the marketplace because of his imprisonment. Therefore, the Philippians assisted him. And then Paul just lets it slip that they had assisted him in the past when he was in Thessalonica. Now, it's interesting, in the letter to the Thessalonians, Paul speaks about how he sacrificed and worked day and night to earn his own living, never mentioning that he was receiving some assistance from the Philippians. Paul seems to be very reticent to be dependent upon others. Even here, when he thanks the Philippians for their offering, he sort of poo-poos it by saying, well, I know how to live without and I know how to live with. So I really didn't need your money, but it's good that you gave it anyways. He's very bashful about the idea that he would be dependent upon others. And that fits with Paul's personality. He was a straightforward, march-ahead sort of person. Very often, those are the very people who have difficulty being vulnerable, admitting that they need help. And yet, in charity, if one doesn't accept the help of others, as well as serve them, then one is really not living true charity. The other side of the coin of service is letting oneself be served. And then finally he speaks about their offering as a fragrant aroma, that the importance of the offering was not how much they sent, it's the fact that they cared and showed their care in a very physical way, that this was as good as any sacrifice that one might offer to God. The Gospel is from Luke 16, 9 to 15. And here again we hear about money, and Jesus warns people not to be concerned too much with material wealth, because it'll only get you into trouble. We should be much more concerned with spiritual wealth. You can't serve both God and mammon, because one of those will be your true master. And so we have to make decisions that in our life, even if we're not going to live absolute poverty, we're at least going to live a life of detachment. That if we have things, as Paul said in the first reading, if we have things, we rejoice in them, and we share with those who don't have. But if we don't have, we don't bemoan the fact and resent that others have things that we don't. Rather, we accept what we have and do the best we can. Now, at the very end of the Gospel reading, the Pharisees feel offended because they feel as if Jesus was speaking against them. And what does Jesus say? You're right. You're right, because God knows your heart, and it's not where it should be. And may God bless us.